These days, filling up the car has become painfully expensive, and that's because often the oil or petroleum is coming from the other side of the world. But now a group of scientists here in northern Britain claim they have perfected the theory of turning carbon dioxide into petroleum, using nothing more than the fresh air around them and electricity. The breakthrough was made here, a modest industrial lot near Darlington. Inside a couple of shipping containers, a group of scientists have built a mini refinery that doesn't need oil.
I am. Hi.
Dan, hello.
Hi.
Peter Harrison is CEO of Air Fuel Synthesis. Would you say part of your mission is to try and save the world?
We believe we've got a technology that can make a significant impact and as a contribution towards greening up the world, but we're not saying it's the only answer.
Colleague Bob Jennings explains the science, which despite all these equations is actually quite simple. Air is combined with sodium hydroxide and passed through an electrolyser to separate the CO2. Water is similarly separated into hydrogen and oxygen. Then the CO2 and hydrogen are reacted together to make methanol and eventually petrol.
Right. In here is where we convert the methanol into petrol.
At the moment, this is all small scale and highly inefficient, producing just 5 litres a day, using a lot of electricity. But the team insists there is potential. And this is what ends up being petrol?
This is the petrol in here, yeah.
So if this was scaled up, you would start to get serious quantities of petrol?
We could make serious amounts of petrol, yes.
Dr. Lee Cronin is sympathetic but sceptical. An academic also trying to find fuel solutions. He says the problem with air-to-fuel is it requires seriously large amounts of electricity. Scaling it up to power the United States would be almost impossible at the moment.
Say 1.4 billion litres of gasoline used in the US every day, and if they were to replace that, if this company was to scale up and replace it, that would require half the world's energy consumption per day to do that. So what we really need to think about is how we can take really cheap, in essence free energy, solar energy, wind energy, and work on a roadmap to start producing carbon neutral fuels, liquid fuels that we can travel around in and most, use for agriculture and for flying aeroplanes.
Bob Jennings collects the latest batch. It looks like beer, but once the foam goes, you can see the fuel rising to the top. It smells just like petrol. So that's amazing. That's basically come from the air.
Yeah. In principle, we can make that from air by taking the carbon dioxide out of the air, hydrogen from water, make hydrogen and carbon dioxide into methanol, and then bring the methanol over here and we convert the methanol into petrol.
It's not free, obviously, and it requires a lot of electricity to do this.
There's lots of electricity, yeah.
So what about people that would say, well, what's the point? Because it's going to cost more in electricity than just going out and buying some petrol.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of renewable energy around at the moment that's wasted. You can't put all the renewable energy into the grid. So what we want to be able to do is to catch all that spare renewable electricity and make something useful of it. And petrol is something that is easy to store and it is very useful. It can go straight into your car.
And presumably there's some parts of the world where they have plenty of electricity, solar power, and no petrol.
Yeah. So we've had inquiries from Patagonia, for example. We've got plenty of wind. Clearly where there's plenty of sunshine, you could use it for that. And we've had inquiries from countries that are landlocked but have hydroelectricity, and they could make their own fuel now rather than having to worry about imports, which are very expensive.
It may seem baffling that this can come from nothing, but in fact it's not a trick.
You can't create energy, as everyone I think knows, and we're not creating energy, we're just converting one form to another.
To start with, AFS is targeting the application of this technology to Formula One.
We've had a lot of interest from the motor racing sector. At the moment, they have a problem getting their green credentials right. We've got a drop-in replacement hydrocarbon fuel, which is carbon neutral.
But if this takes off, it could help fight climate change. If electricity was used from renewable sources like wind farms, then the petrol produced wouldn't add extra CO2 to the atmosphere.
As we build up to refinery scale, I think we can make a significant difference to the amount of CO2 that's being released unnecessarily into the atmosphere.
Meaning one day motoring might not be bad for the planet. It wouldn't release any extra CO2 into the atmosphere, just CO2 that's already been sucked out of the air by making fuel, a process that's used electricity from wind or solar power.
We've got a demonstration here. We use a scooter just to demonstrate that what we're making is actually a fuel.
Like everything here, the demonstration is small scale. A tiny engine fueled by a splash of green petroleum. But it could be the beginning of a revolution. And for the skeptics, here's the proof it works. Dan Rivers, CNN, in Darlington.